Yo, what's up? So I'm gonna do part two finally. I'm never making a video that starts out with part one, I think, ever again. I am definitely not timely enough to do that. So anyway, a lot of stuff has happened. A lot of stuff I want to cover. Probably too much, so I apologize in advance if this one gets kind of rambly. But there's been quite a few changes in feeder, and on the back end, with CPB, we've had a lot of stuff go on. Anybody who's been in Discord probably knows most of that. So new beta is dropping in probably about 24 hours, maybe a little less, maybe a little more. So I meant to have this done before that. It was a few days ago, but it seems like we've got nothing but curveballs. So I'm going to run through a couple of the key things I think that are changing that I feel are most important that people are waiting for, and then I might kind of talk your ear off going through actual settings and some ideas and stuff. There's a user who I don't know if he wants to be named, but dropped a pretty cool config file that gave me some ideas. That some of the stuff kind of conflicted with what I already did, but I see the difference and why it makes sense. So it's kind of cool to see how other people do things. Opens your eyes a little bit. You get stuck in a certain way of thinking, and excuse me. You don't really break out of that box until you see somebody else's attack. All right. So that being said, couple things. First big major change is we are now going to be able to put different buy strategies in different groupings. So to show you what that looks like, it looks something like this. So I've got the very basic file. This is something else I've been working on. I want to go through and basically simplify a lot of these. I think one of the problems I've been seeing with people that have complaints about the way feeder adjusts profit trailer is that, one, they're using settings from somebody else they don't fully understand, and that's just the fact, right? Two, those settings can also tend to be very convoluted, maybe trying to do too much, and what you end up doing is restricting your trading. So when people say, "Oh, I turned off feeder and I'm making better profits," that could be true. You're also increasing your risk factors, right? Like some of these benefits that you get with a well-made feeder configuration aren't all that tangible. I've been talking with Methadone about that. We've been kind of trying to make that a tangible thing so you guys can see things like your risk exposure is sometimes not something that you see on paper. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But so I'm trying to make a more baseline one that has less going on. Those are easier to troubleshoot, and you can slowly complicate those as time goes on, because if you start with a nice small base and you add one thing to it, you know what you last changed, and you can kind of go from there. So something to note. So you can see here's the different things. Yes, soil undies. Yeah. So I made one that's like super bear, right? If the the price changes down by 4% in the last 30 minutes, just don't do anything. Just sell it all, right? And that brings up an interesting point. People have asked me about some of these things that are related, because not everybody really sees how one thing affects something else. So, for instance, if you're in this market condition grouping, this number is directly related to this number, right? Because it's checking the market trend. It uses that variable. So if dropping 4% in 30 minutes is different than dropping 4% over a day, for instance. Okay. So you have to consider that, how much time you're looking at, what your window is, and what you're considering to be your trigger. There's no perfect number for that. It's different for everybody. People have different ideas of what a bear market looks like. I think I wrote something down too. Blah, 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 blah. Trend time and coin. Oh, yeah. So What else? So that's kind of cool. Oh, there's a weight to it too. Okay, why is there a weight? Well, because you can put these buy strategies in any market grouping, or any grouping. Sorry, not market grouping. Any grouping. There can be conditions where there are two things that are active at the same time. For instance, I could be in my super bear market, and I could also have this buy spread thrown into, a price trend change grouping. And if they're both the same, or both conditions exist, well, the program needs to know which buy value to use, and so that's where the weight comes in. So if you put more weight into your market configs, then you'd put that number higher to make that override any other volume groupings or anything else, anywhere else you've had it. Again, it's something you have to choose. You have to figure out what you think is most important, and weight it accordingly. But that's to stop the race condition. So if there's multiples, that's how to stop that. I think there's some other stuff I didn't really prepare as a change log. Yeah, I can just go through the change log. How about that? So you guys will all see this soon. This I'm going to go over later. Again, we were working on a better way to do the long and short-term price trend, but I've got a whole other section for that. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, okay, there's volatility grouping now. So you can now make things happen based on your volatility calcs. Those are calculated by looking at the candles. I don't know if we went over that before, but we'll just jump in there real quick. I'm here. So anytime you're doing these API pulls, you are getting the OHLC, so your open, high, low, close. In a candle, that is your four data points. So you've got an open and a close. That's probably way too small to see, but basically the bottom and the top of the candle, your open, your close, and then your high and your low are the tips of the wicks. See that little guy there? Well, the wicks are showing you that price activity during that candle time. And it closed, in this case, this candle here, it closed a lot lower. So prices oscillated a whole lot. But then you can see where there was a whole lot of activity, but it kind of closed very flat. But we want to measure things like how much of that activity was there, because we know at some point during that time the prices were in that range. So the trailing calculations here, you can say, I'm not sure why they're combined here. I'm guessing we have to get that math, but you could look at just upside or just downside. In this case, it looks like he's doing a comparison of total volatility. So maybe if it's just too volatile, you can just do stuff or not do stuff, or offset or not offset, right? What else? There's probably some fixes and whatnot. And we came down, and here's, come back here. There's been some variable changes. Anybody doing any updates with this, when this drops, you're going to have to pretty much blow everything away. I would suggest just taking your existing configs and re-inputting them into a new config file. It's just less messy that way. But, it's up to you. But definitely the database will have to be blown away because there's been some changes. He has a syntax example in here, which is cool, but he already showed you that. And we get back into the older stuff. So anyway, so that's the change log. The other thing we were just talking about is this business. Booyah. Okay. So what are we looking at? Well, originally, the long and short-term price trends, which I believe I'm hoping he will split those out, because right now we've got a short-term and a long-term, but the short-term does a lot of stuff. It affects coins, it affects the market trend, and in my mind, I would like the market trend variable to be by itself, so I can mess with these windows in a separate way, which probably happened, but I don't know how much. It's easy to say, yeah, just change it, right? But I didn't write the code. I don't know what's involved in splitting that out. It can get kind of hairy, I'm sure. So here's how it originally worked. So you'd have a window. In this case, this green is my long term. I'd have a price here and a price here. And it was very simple math. It was like, is the price now, what's the price now compared to the price it was N number of hours ago? And that's a percentage. So, I mean, it's cool, but it doesn't really tell you much. I mean, what are you going to infer from that amount of data? Pretty much nothing, right? You just know that the price was higher or lower. It doesn't tell you anything. So, later on, he made a change to this. And so I looked at that math and I was kind of like, I see where he's going. But to me, it still wasn't as useful as it could be. And so I kind of typed this up for him and made a proposal for a change, because what we really want to see, because, well, let me put it this way. There's only so much data we can look at. We can't do real TA on this. Well, we can, but there becomes a point where it's going to be way too much to do client side. You start to run out of time. The bot needs to make decisions, and so it's using raw data. So when you pull from the API, you don't get TA, right? You get OHLC. So that's what we have to work with. So within that parameter, or within those parameters, we thought, okay, I have a window. I can set a window of time, and I can look at the lowest price in that window and the highest price in that window. And I can divide it by 2. And that gives me this hash mark. I keep wanting to point at my screen. I'm going to point the screen, and you guys can't see that. I have to move a hash around to see the hash, but it's right there, that cross in the middle. That's the midpoint. And on TradingView, it's because I drew that rectangle that way. But we want to see now the now price, which is over here, is somewhat below this median that we've drawn. So that by itself probably doesn't tell you a ton either, but it's something, right? I know that I can say this much time has passed. What's my average price kind of in that time? A true average would iterate through all of these candles, get the middle price, and then, draw me an average line across it. Again, that may or may not increase overhead. Right now, it doesn't happen. Right now, we're using these 2 data points and making a middle. Maybe later on, that's something we can do. But I would imagine probably wouldn't look a ton different unless you had something like a big quick pump and then a flat series across there. You'd get a different average number because you're seeing all the prices as opposed to just these 2. Anyway, so you have that. And that's where this math is. So anybody who's curious about how that works out, there it is. So you can start to make a decision with your grouping based on that. So going forward from that, right now there's no comparisons between the windows. We have the short and the long. And we can do that math on either of them. But we're not comparing window to window, which may make sense. The other side of that is we also have volatility calcs. So I'm thinking like this. Here's my window. How do I know I'm here? I know we've done this. How do I know I'm here? And at what point would I buy? And I would argue that if you calculate the last, however many candles, or even candles in the short-term window, if I see a lot of low wicks and no top wicks, which is, that's kind of like how Heikin-Ashi looks. Like, I bet you if I change, whoops, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go to here. Oh, shit. Nah. Oh, that's going to look all funky now because the candles are drawn differently, but whatever. It gives us something anyway. So like it's all broken. But this shows you a little bit better how it looks. So you can see on a Heikin-Ashi that you see that momentum a little easier, I think. But anyway, you'd see these down wicks, and you'd go, all right, cool. So I know that we've been a lot of volatility, and I know that we're on the downswing. So let's maybe use that as a trigger. Let's set a market for that. That could be a current, a bear market for this coin. So it's still not perfect. Again, it's really hard to take this amount of data and make really good decisions on it. It's still, it's still a bit of a game, right? And even with some of the best TA, you can still make bad buys. I tell you, the market is the number one driver of all of this. If you can't short and you enter into something, it has to at least oscillate a little bit so you can DCA and get out. If it goes down and pretty much stays going down, what are you going to do? Like, you've already made the purchase, you're already in. So you need a bull. Now, if you can short, of course, in that case, yeah, you can make money just as the price goes down, right? You're not exiting. You're making money, borrowing and selling in the future. We can't do that. There's only a few markets that even support that. Poloniex has some shorting, but there's no bots for that, so not going to happen. Anyway, so there's that. I wanted to kind of cover some of that. So that's the new change with the short and long-term trends. If anybody has any ideas about a better way to do that, a better way to compare two windows of time and what's happening now, using things like the OHLC data, using these trends, and maybe using the volatility, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear it, because I think there's an answer there somewhere. Just not sure where it is. Anyway, so we're trying. So, all right, let me get out of this, and I'll come back to Mr. Config. Okay. So with this, I promised we would go over some of this, and listen, I've seen enough other people's settings, and I've seen people smarter than me making pretty cool setups. It's not perfect, but I wanted to go over some different ideas that you might want to think about in these markets. What I alluded to earlier was the DCA stuff, and that's still kind of the bread and butter of how people make money. And there's at least a couple major different ways to look at it. I made my own version of the DCA calculator. I'll go ahead and just put this in the comments, or in the video description. You can grab it. It's not pretty, but it works. So this is what I was using to give me visibility into crafting a better DCA, and knowing how much money I'm going to be throwing at something. So if I'm going to do, I think the part 1 video that was 3 years ago, I did show an old experiment with Ripple where I let it go low BB DCA with no limits, right? It just, every time it hit the low BB trigger, it just bought. And it works. It's only good for one pair, and you will probably run out of money eventually. But you could do it. I mean, you could do a low BB like -20 or something and just let it go. It's going to keep buying on the bottoms of those trends, and eventually it'll be able to exit out. So I'll probably try to run that experiment again, and post that data back. Just right now, my bot doesn't look great. I'm still caught up in some nastiness from when the API took a shit, and I have a major bag. Where is that? PDCA, yeah. That bad boy right there, that Nano. Killing me, Nano. You're killing me. Anyway, so it's there. So I, haven't really played with this a ton. I'm sure I'm in buy balance at this point, so I have to go clean some of that up. And I was testing with it. Profits weren't great. So I might need to make another one, that 2 or 3 different accounts that I could do certain slices on, and anyway, okay, where was I? DCAs. So I have them in here. So there's 2 different things you can do. On this side, you can put your current TCV and then your max cost, and it's going to tell you what your first buy will be. and then I have it set to tell you how many levels you're going to make it before you die. So I took my TCV from here, which was 868, and my max cost percentage 4, whatever. And then you can put your DCA levels over here, and it's going to tell you what your average price is over that period of time for each level, how much money you've spent, which that's what this does over here too. But this is the piece that I like to see. I want to see my average price drop from the initial entry, because Anderson is going, okay, double up, right? Double up each time, but it's looking at the last average price for this next trigger. So 2% from here, and then 5% from here, 7%. So you can't just add all these up and say, well, that's how many, that's how much percentage drop I can handle. You have to look at this. And I know that for 5 levels, I can handle a 26% drop and still be at a place where I can exit and make money. So you can use this to kind of look at charts and go, okay, well, what's the chance that this coin drops this amount of percent in my trading time before I cut bags or whatever? And use this math to figure out how many levels you want to do. Now, I used to always allow for a very low max cost. I would do something like a 2% or whatever, which lets me get 5 levels if I needed it. These numbers are kind of fuzzy too, because you don't always get to buy the max amount you want. So a lot of times this doesn't work out. It's close, but it's not perfect, right? The other thing to consider is, depending on the way those levels are set, you can't reserve all your capital and assume that, well, I need enough capital for every one of my trading pairs to go to level 5. Because if you're first, if your level 1 is actually, wrong one. If your level 1 is like at 5 and then 9, or whatever, you're going to have less levels hit, right? Because by in this case, by the second level, you're at 13%, 13.5% below where you entered. Which in these markets that might not be enough, okay? Especially if you're playing the whole market. This is all configurable. You could make it to where you are only in the top volumes, and if you're in the top volume coins, those kinds of percentages work. But these are the kind of tools you got to play with to visualize and to tweak to where you want to be. So I would suggest taking a look. I've seen a bunch of different DCA things out there. To be honest, Anderson might not even be the best way to do it. Maybe just plain old low BB with a cost limiter on it. Your DCA balance limiter, and let the Bollinger Bands determine that, because in this case it's static. You're telling it, hey, drop, wait for this, whereas the coin might not care about your levels, right? To find that out for sure would be a lot of data crunching. You'd have to do a lot of work. It's doable, but as of yet, I haven't seen anybody put that work in. So we're just kind of playing with it. So there's that. Anyway, you're free to steal that and do what you want. Where was I? Yeah, okay. The top currencies to check, I lower that. To me, if I'm thinking about what do I think is a trend, and for me a trend is top coins. I could look at all 50 or whatever and say, okay, well, I'm getting a better overall view of the market, but at the same time you're also getting an overall view into the lower and more volatile shitty coins. If I'm looking at sentiment, I'm thinking the top boys. What are the big boys doing? That could be wrong, but that's the way I've been doing it. And then also, obviously, this number will affect these numbers. So there's a trinity there. There's your change percentage, the amount of currencies you're checking, and the amount of time you're looking at. Those three things are all interrelated. You change one, it affects the others. So you have to take all of those into account. I stole a couple of these guys. So these sections here are, again, from this a user that if they want to be mentioned, I will. As of right now, it was a kind of a closed thing. So, but this user made a beautiful config file. Like I was like, wow, that's really cool. It was all ASCII'd out, like the old school info files from from back in the BBS days. If you're old enough to have been on a BBS, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway. There's some thoughts about what to do in different markets. And for me, again, I'm trying to keep it simple, but this other user's strategy was more like the opposite of of allowing for a lot of DCA. It was kind of like DCA once or twice and be done. If it dropped below that, maybe stop loss it or deal with it another way. But you can use these offsets to do really cool things. And so in his case, or her case maybe, the comments are saying things like, look, if I'm in this market, adjust my DCA enabled value, saying don't DCA into a market that's generally trending well. Why not? Well, because if it's trending relatively okay, then just wait. Why tie up that capital in that coin when you could be taking that and putting it into the next hot buy, right? The other thing that I just realized I didn't bring up was why you would use a different buy strategy in a particular market. And that's because typically like a negative EMA spread works well in a bear market because you're looking for that gap. And those gaps happen more often negatively in a downtrending market. So you're trying to get those triggers and get in on those buys. But the reverse is true in a bull market. You might, you're trending this way, you're trending up. So how do you find those little dips? Well, that's where an EMA cross would come in because you're looking for that when that short line crossed up over your long trend line. And you're saying, there it is. I'm trending up, and you're buying on that positive spread. And the cross and the limiters will make sure you're not buying into something that's possibly a pump type situation where you might get screwed. Again, great topic for discussion. If anybody wants to bring that up and discuss like why you would or wouldn't use a market, I've seen a lot of people request this particular feature, which I love it. I think it's gonna help a lot. But yeah, I'd like to open the discussion on who's using what when, right? Because it's kind of cool. But anyway, so back to what I was saying here. This guy here, he's saying, okay, yeah, basically don't DCA as much when the market's good. Adjust the amount of times I can DCA. Change the offset for selling, increase the profit of the bag. So he's saying, if you come back up here to where I always get lost when I come up here. I think it's the sell trigger. Making sure that you're making more money. You want to make your offsets in a good market reflect a good market. Be more greedy. If things are trending up, then you should be offsetting to widen those trailing values and get more money out of your investment, and at the same time offset to negatives in a bad market. But you have to understand how all that works and tweak that out yourself, because if you don't, you might see less performance out of a feeder configured bot, because feeder can be done incorrectly and yes, negatively affect your trading compared to a very vanilla, plain, profit trailer configuration that's not doing all this other stuff. I mean, it's power tool, man. Like I said, you have a power. If you got a handsaw, and you don't know what you're doing, you cut your hand off, right? I'd have been better off with just a regular saw. Yes, you would have. But power saws are cool. So is feeder. Okay. Shit, I totally lost my train of thought again. Awesome. Where was it? Oh yeah, I was just kind of going through some of this stuff. So, I did not. No, please don't take all these and try to make your own config. This is not done. I just got tired of messing with it, and I figured this beta is dropping tomorrow, so I need to get something out because I've been extremely lazy. But this is enough to show you the format and some of the thought behind some of the changes. Let me check my notes and see what else I had. Most of this is just my own personal notes. Yeah, okay. I think that's about it. I feel like I'm missing something, but that's probably been like a half hour already, and I've just been yapping. So I think we'll end it here for that one, and that's about it. Leave some comments, hit me up in Discord, and hopefully these changes will be good for everybody. And later on, we are. Well, when I say we, I'm not programming shit, but there are some major graphical changes in the works that will be very cool for everybody. No timelines yet, but they are being looked at. We understand that it would be nice to have a GUI and charts and knobs and buttons and sliders and all that fun stuff. So there's a lot of cool things in the works. It's definitely being actively developed. So stay tuned, and I'll catch you on the flip side.